Hello friends, we are going to study about the reproduction under the chapter reproduction in lower and higher plants. So what is the definition of the reproduction? A reproduction gives rise to the young ones of their own kind, that is known as a reproduction. Reproduction is able to give rise young ones of their own kind is known as a reproduction. Now this reproduction, what are the essentiality of the reproduction or the importance of the reproduction? Reproduction continue the species as well as continue the life of a living organism. So it is which are the importance of reproduction. Now this reproduction, there are two modes of the reproduction. One, it is known as a asexual reproduction and another it is known as a sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction means the reproduction occur without meiosis or without fusion of gametes, that is known as a asexual reproduction. This asexual reproduction also known as a epimixy. Why it is known as a epimixy? Without fusion of genetic material, the offsprings will be produced. It is known as a asexual reproduction. Another mode of this reproduction, it is known as a sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction means the union of male and female gamete. So that is known as a sexual reproduction. In the sexual reproduction, there is a mixing of the genetic material also, and it shows a variation in the next generation also. This sexual reproduction. Then about this asexual reproduction, the types of the asexual reproduction in lower plants. In the lower plants, now this asexual reproduction takes place without meiosis or without union of male and female gamete. Now first type of this asexual reproduction in lower plant, which is known as a binary fission. Binary fission mostly occur in a bacteria and amoeba and paramecium. One cell divides to produce the two daughter cells, and these two daughter cells, these are the new individuals. This is a simple type of the reproduction which occur in a bacteria, which occur in amoeba and paramecium. Then second type of this reproduction, asexual reproduction in lower plants, now the budding. It is the most common in the type of the reproduction in the yeast. Yeast is one of the fungus. It is a unicellular fungus. Now in this yeast cell, when yeast cell, suppose now this is a yeast cell, this yeast cell divide to two cells. And these two cells at the maturity again divide to produce these two cells. In this way, this now the chain-like structure or the budding type of the structure which is formed here, and these new individuals or the new cells which remain attached to the parent cell. After some times they separated and they give rise to the new individuals. So this is about this budding. The third type of the asexual reproduction, it is known as the sporulation. Sporulation, which is more common in the fungi and the algae. Now in this Chlamydomonas and in this penicillium. Now this reproduction, now here the asexual reproduction takes place by the spores. Some of the spores which are motile spores, particularly in the algae, example is the Chlamydomonas, which produces the zoospores, and which are motile spores. This spore give rise to the new individual. Then this in this penicillium, now the conidia which is present here, and now the structure of this spore just like this, which arranged here this, and which give rise to the new individual with the help of this conidia, now which mostly occur in this penicillium. Penicillium, it is also the one of the fungus. So this is about this sporulation. Then fourth one, it is known as this fragmentation. Fragmentation, this type of the asexual reproduction mostly occur in the Spirogyra, mostly occur in a algae, most of the algae, and the example is a Spirogyra. You know that this Spirogyra, it is a filamentous algae which is made up of the cells which arrange one above the other, and now this accidentally now this filament which is broken, and this broken filament or the fragment which also give rise to the new individual, and that type of the reproduction that is known as a fragmentation. and which mostly occur in this Spirogyra. This is the one of the most example of this fertilization. Now here in this asexual reproduction, you can see here these types of the asexual reproduction lower plants. Lower plants मध्ये या टाइपचे 4 प्रकारचे रिप्रोडक्शन्स आहे आणि याच्यानंतर आपण बघणार आहोत द रिप्रोडक्शन, द व्हेजिटेटिव्ह रिप्रोडक्शन. This is also the one of the type of the asexual reproduction that is known as a vegetative reproduction. Vegetative reproduction now this is a vegetative reproduction. It is one of the kind of the asexual reproduction, one of the type of the asexual reproduction. Vegetative reproduction means the reproduction takes place by vegetative part of a plant, may be root, stem and leaves, which are known as a propagate. This vegetative reproduction or vegetative propagation takes place by the vegetative part of the plant, may be root, stem and leaves, that is known as a vegetative reproduction. A small piece of the vegetative part of the root, vegetative part of the stem and these leaves, which also give rise to the new individual. That's why that is known as a vegetative reproduction. On the basis of which this vegetative reproduction, natural vegetative reproduction, and second which is known as a artificial vegetative reproduction. Naturally the vegetative reproduction or the vegetative parts of the plant body, it may be the root. The example is a stem tuber, the stem. Now the tuberous stem, example is a potato, and the natural vegetative reproduction takes place by the leaf. The example is a bryophylla. So naturally that type of the reproduction takes place there. But now here another second type of this vegetative reproduction, that is known as an artificial type of the reproduction. Now in this artificial vegetative reproduction, on the basis of beneficial of the mankind, now the artificial reproduction mainly used by the human beings for the better quality of the plants, for a better yield also. So now here this artificial, there are 3 types of the artificial vegetative propagation. Now the cutting, budding and the grafting. So for this cutting, budding and grafting, you have to know about the terms of the scion on the stalk. What is the scion and what is a stalk? So scion means the part of the plant, usually a piece of the young stem, which is inserted into the rooted stalk to produce a graft, is called the scion. And second term, it is known as a stalk. Stalk, a plant rooted in the soil on which scion is inserted for grafting, is called the stalk. Stalk means only the rooted plant. The plant rooted in the soil on which scion is inserted for grafting, so is called the stalk. And the grafted part, it is known as a scion. And the rooted plant, it is known as a stalk. Stalk means the part of the plant. It may be the stem, it may be the root, it may be the leaves also. Mostly the stem which is used for that, and usually a piece of the young stem which is inserted into a rooted stalk to produce a graft is called the scion. So this is about these 2 terms which are mostly used in the budding and this grafting. So first of all, the first type of this artificial reproduction, now it is known as this cutting. What happened in this cutting? When you take a piece of the plant, it may be the root, it may be the stem or the leaf also, and which must having 2 or 3 buds, and which is placed in the soil, which also grow as a new plant. So that is known as this cutting. Then second about this budding. For this budding, so bud which is taken along with the bark of the stem also, and which is inserted on the rooted plant, which is inserted bud which is also act as a graft. and this grafted part which is inserted on the stalk, which is inserted on the rooted plant, and which also give rise to a new plant, so that is known as this budding. After this, another part of this artificial reproduction, it is known as a grafting. Grafting, it is one of the technique also. Budding, that is also the one of the grafting, and mainly in this grafting the two different plants are combined or joined to each other with the help of this cambium and also grow as a new individual, so that is known as this grafting. Now in this grafting, these two terms which are very essential. Now the first is the scion. Now the grafted part, it must be a piece of the young stem which is selected and which is inserted on the rooted stalk and to produce a new plant, so that is known as this grafting. In this grafting, the two different species, this grafting also takes place in two different plants, and these two different plants come close to each other with the help of this cambium, and now which grow as a new plant, so that is known as this grafting. It is one of the technique also, and in this technique the two plants join together and to produce a new individual, and all this takes place due to this cambium, because you know that this cambium, that is present in the vascular bundle of the plant, and the cambium, the meristematic tissue which are present, and they are able to divide again and again, and so the division takes place with the help of division. The cell division takes place there with the help of this cambium, and there is new plant which is also the produced there, and which show the very good quality in the fruit or in the flower also due to this grafting. And grafting, it is also the cheap method in the artificial propagation. Budding, which is also again the very cheap method. Then about this, what are the importance of the artificial vegetative propagation? Another method which is also there, that is known as a tissue culture method, which is mostly applied nowadays by agriculturists and horticulturists. Now in this tissue culture, the one piece of the very small piece of the tissue which is also selected and which grown in a culture medium to produce the plantlet, and now that plantlet which when placed in a moist soil to produce the new plant within a short period, that is also known as a micropropagation. And in this micropropagation, from a small piece of the tissue which can produce many plants, so that method which is mostly used by the agriculturist. So this is about this artificial vegetative propagation. So followed about this, the reproduction, and there are two types of this reproduction: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. We already studied in this asexual reproduction in lower plants, and thus about this vegetative reproduction.